back to the Dr. Supercoach podcast. You're on once again with Cheezo. And on with me this evening to talk all things round 12. It is, when I say pig, you say oink. Pig!
Oink.
Pig!
Oink.
He's back! We've got the dream duo, Cheezo and Pig. Mate, how you going, champion? You have a good week? We've hit the buys. Everyone knows this is when Cheezo comes barnstorming, and I can confirm I have barnstormed my first storm of the barn this year. I went up 34 solitary points this week. Woohoo!
You are flying. You're killing you're top of the podcaster tree right now. Pistol's been talking a big game the last few weeks, saying he's going to catch you. And he was right on your heels, but this week you put a bit of
lasted
distance
1 week.
He
Ran out of puff. That's a little choo-choo that thought he could get up the hill, and he got to the hill and realised there's just another hill on the other side.
It's plenty hills. So, yeah, how'd you go? Tell us your score and where you're sitting.
So 2016, which I thought was competitive, and I was ranked 19,200 for the week, which is sort of ridiculous to me. I actually can't believe that.
Still moved you up, though, slightly, you said?
Yeah, still moved me up just a little bit. So I went from 1990 to 1956. So basically nowhere.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I guess when you're at the slightly pointy end, you've got to do a little bit more than par. Mine was a bit annoying because I had the 2K, and then a late Nick Martin adjustment ticked me down to 1999. So I'm rounding that up to 2,000. But that was quite funny because I was actually watching our projections all week, and I had you covered for all of it. And then that
You had me covered. Righto. Thanks, Pig. Enough of that hyperbole from you.
That Tuke Miller last quarter, crap 50-metre, just got you over the line over me, got him a goal, got you a few points. But I also shot myself in the foot a little bit with a Caleb Sarong captain, just a ton. Missed out on that Bont or that Dacos VC. That I think that was kind of the difference between a lot of good scores and a not quite so good score. So that would have been nice if I had got it, but I'm still every week, I said it last week as well, every week I've moved in the right direction, got a green arrow, but it's only by a few hundred spots again. So I'm just not. Yeah, I've just got the pig waddle, like I said last week. Not really shuffling.
Pig waddle.
But, I might start making some fun moves that might, could pay off. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had 15 premiums, or so-called premiums, and 4 rookies on field of my 19. And I still managed. Dawson's 55 still somehow made its way into my team, which was a little bit interesting. It was great to have Will Graham back, but it didn't do a great number in terms of our scores. That extra 14K, I'm going to be extremely happy that he presented that to me. I'm very thankful. Thank you so much. But this week I'm looking at 18 premiums and 3 rookies on field. So I'm hoping for a bit of a bounce back score this week, Pig. So how are you shaping up for round 12?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty all right too. I've got Luke Ryan, Dan Houston, Zach Butters and Caleb Sarong. So I've got 4 primos on the bye. But otherwise, I'm looking pretty healthy. I could potentially be fielding 20, probably 21, because I don't think Zach Reed gets up. Well, he won't with his new pec injury, but should be fielding 21, should be going pretty well. It's probably the last bye that's my... Actually, no, it was this one just gone that was actually my week one, so the fact I still climbed a little bit was good. I'm one of those guys holding McKercher, so I'm just really hoping he's back and can be a bit of a point of difference because of that distributing role in the North back line. He might kind of decide how I go through the buys, whether he plays or not, whether it's a good buy or not good buy stretch.
Wow, so you actually have cash. What's that feel like?
Well, I've actually also got, even after trades this week, then also 300K in the bank to use next week, so it feels nice. Feels very good.
I'm scraping by week. I want this to be known, I'm doing an upgrade this week, not because I had planned to or for a player that I want, but it's specifically to beat Tartars in Rivalry League, so I hope he's listening.
Yeah.
I'm throwing everything out the window to make sure he goes 0-10 to start the season after being the number 1 pick.
That's not good.
So it's just pure gamesmanship, Pig, and it's everything that the league lives up to. Mate, we do have some housekeeping to go through. No Patreon signups this week, but we do have a Cancer Council dono from Vanderlei Industries. Donating for dumb things like many others, looped Fraser on Friday night and had Richards 100 stuck on the bench with the Flanders laid out. So I think that's a dono from last week that missed last week's pod. Thank you for the donation. Very, very close to 30k with the donos on Cancer Council now. People, we've got 29,359 in total as well. So thank you everyone that has contributed over the time. And once again, Dr. Supercoach podcast powered by Code Sports, our lovely partners at Code Sports. We've got our weekly articles going up that have been well received this year. We've got some great feedback from those. So thanks to everyone that's checked them out. Pig, we will jump into some interesting Supercoach content this week. The first question I want to know your thoughts. You said that you had 300k in the bank. Does that mean you're not doing an upgrade this week, or what are your thoughts in general over the 4 week span of the buys? Because back in the day, it used to be don't really upgrade at the start of the buys and kind of upgrade to people coming off their buy. So I'm wondering what your thoughts is for the 2024 buys.
Yeah, look, I am upgrading this week, but because of the cash that Wilson and Jack McRae had, their downgrade side of things just leaves so much cash in the bank. So they're, I guess, my two best still cashed up guys that I'm looking to get rid of. I'm potentially thinking about doing that this week. So that's kind of why I've got this chest. And as 50 Cent
I've
said,
seen your chest. It is bulging.
It is. If haters going to hate, let them hate and watch the money pile up. Is that what 50 Cent said?
That's exactly right. It was actually Banks, but we won't.
I know
we won't go into that law.
You are the rap guru, but I'm going to let them hate and watch the money pile up by probably culling Jack McRae this week. I was actually going to get rid of him last week. Then you and I had a little chat, and I worked out I could still do my trade and keep him. He got that nice little 100, but I don't think he's really going to replicate that again. Brisbane, a hard matchup. He's not a keeper. He can go. So I still am doing an upgrade. I'm looking at getting one of the premium mids coming off their buy. And I think that'll be a good talking point as we move on about what's the best one to target, because there's a few different people. I'm actually myself going to look at Chad Warner just because...
The Chad,
a bit of difference, a point of difference, but it's not because of that. It's more... I did a bit of research in the preseason. I made a video and he was one of my breakout candidates, and I even said I would start this guy if he didn't have that early buy. So now he's sitting there. He's available to me, a massive 3-round average. He's in a bit of form. I think I'm just going to have a bit of fun and just get him because, I probably would have started him if I could, but I might as well get him now. And then I'm looking at a couple of downs grades. I'm hoping there's some mid-season draftees come in. You and I guess we could speculate on who they will be and who they might not be, but really people are going to know when teams come out and if they are named, you just get them pretty much.
Yeah.
Blight and Payne. Blight for Richmond is one that's looking really, really positive. He had a massive AFL game and Richmond need warm bodies. Payne for North Melbourne is highly touted. He could be good. Even Sard for Essendon had a great game maybe. Who knows? But yeah, if any of those come in, I think we just get them because you're getting some warm bodies during the buys, plus they're 102, so you're freeing up a lot of cash. So long way of answering your question that yes, I think we should be upgrading this week because I think there are some really good players that have come off their buys. What are you thinking about that?
There's a lot of fantasy relevant guys as well that obviously a lot of us are going to have like the Heenies and the Cheezels, but you've also mentioned Warner. Dunkley's been great this year. Zorko, a lot of people might have missed out on grabbing at this point. I've even seen some people say that they're going to be upgrading Sweet to Grundy this week, as there are too.
Yep.
Which is interesting. Neil, who's been high in terms of the averages, and Gordon, who's one of the guys that's sort of going under the radar as well. I'd love to know your thoughts, Pig, in terms of Gordon v. Warner, considering the 70, 80k price difference. Gordon's just been doing his thing and averaging 105, going under the radar. So it'd be interesting to see if he has an uptick in terms of his output as the year progresses. But potentially, if you're struggling for a little bit of cash, he could be someone to look at as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, why don't we even just like we've brushed over some of these premiums, but we could talk about them a bit more. Let's talk
Sure.
about three defenders, I guess, are coming off the bye that people might look at. So I'm talking about there's Harry Sheezel, Lockie Whitfield, and Nick Blakey.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think all those three guys are going to be pretty close to that kind of top 8, maybe defender mark. I've kind of been saying I think there's 3, maybe 4 defenders that are kind of clear, and then there's just I was calling it a big mush of players that kind of
A mush.
a mush. It's like mushed peas. Or mashed potato,
Why?
whatever you.
Why peas? Why is that your first thought?
Have you
The
been
inner thoughts of the pig. The trough. He's gone to the trough and he's like, my favourite. It's the mush snow
Gonna mush
peas.
up those peas. I was thinking, have you been to England and you've had their bangers and mash, or even their fish and chips, and you get a side of mushed peas to your fish and chips?
Interesting.
That's what came to my head. Anyway, in the mushy pea section, I think there's going to be a lot of players that kind of defenders that average like 102 to 107. And I probably put Sheezel, Whitfield, and Blakey all in that basket. Sheezel probably has the biggest upside to, what he did at the start of the year if he gets that defender role back. But
Yeah.
out of those three, do you have a preference if people were to trade in one of them?
I still think Sheezel has the highest upside. Obviously, the thing hanging over his head is which week is he going to go back to the midfield. The benefit of him being owned by 60% of the competition is if that you do think that he is going to regress, then you can kind of take on the rest of the competition by being in the 40% that don't own him. So that's an interesting thing. I think it probably goes in that order. Blakey is just going to average about the same, and it's going to really determine on how many tags Whitfield gets, whether he's going to push up towards the 110. Which is what he's averaged in non-tag games. So he could almost push himself out of that 107 mark, but he's actually been. Don't quote me on this, pig. I read it somewhere that he's been the most tagged player in 2024.
Yeah, I'd believe it.
And he's averaging a flat ton. So, how many tags have we got going forward is going to be the interesting thing. You talk while I look at his upcoming run and pretend like I know who's going to tag him.
Well, I know he's got James Jordan again very soon, but there is some others.
Tagged him to a 54 4 weeks ago, and he's got him in 3 weeks. Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Would you be surprised if I said out of those three, Nick Blakey has the highest 3-round average, higher than Sheezel especially?
Wouldn't be surprised, no.
Well, I am telling you that. That's the truth. So Blakey's an option. I think he's definitely a point of difference, but he's not really that much cheaper than them, I guess is the thing.
He just strikes me as a guy that's just going to go 102, 103, and that's just what his output is. Whereas I feel like the other two have the upside of 5 points clear of him.
Yeah. No, I agree. So and if we want to talk about midfielders, then coming off their bye, there's probably 6 that are really interesting. And quite a variance of prices too. So there's the more expensive guys like Warner, Dunkley and Neal. I think they're all in the 600s.
Yep.
But they're in the 600s for a reason. They've been very good this year and have a good 3-round average. There's Errol and LDU around the kind of a bit cheaper mark. I think they're both around 550. They've been 120-plus guys, not for a whole season, but over, I guess, a 4 or 6 week stretch in their career, so we know they've got that in them. But they've been a bit disappointing this year. Although LDU actually has one of the best 5-round averages in the game, he's really turned around. And then there's Tom Green down below 500k, and he's also shown 120 glimpses in the past, but he's actually been quite frustrating this year. Are you looking to trade any of these guys in?
I've already completed my midfield with a bunch of has-beens, so I'm not looking to bring in a midfield guy this week. I honestly think it comes down to... I wouldn't say that these guys are necessarily better than the other. Like LDU seems to have recaptured his form. He's got a 126 3-round average, but he's only gone above 120 once in the last 10 rounds. So it's like he put up a 152 against Essendon, which is not unsurprising. And then every other game, like let's say the last five, 117, 152, 109, 90, 112, even going back further than that is 101, 87, 88. Like, it's not like you're buying into someone there's been a huge turn of form and you're getting like 120s from him, like the 3 round average suggests. I still see him as probably underperforming what we expected from him as a starting selection. And the fact that he's so close to 600K does make me a little bit skeptical. I think if you were already shopping in the 580K bracket, like you only need 35K to get Lockie Neal. Like I'd be looking at some way to do that, and even less to get Dunkley, who also seems a little bit more solidified, and about 30K to get Chad Warner. These are the types that I would be looking to get if you're looking at LDU, who's just so similar in price.
Yeah,
I think it's when it gets down into the low 500s. There's really just a smattering of players that you can have a bit of a crack at, like the Errols and the Greens, if you think they're going to turn around. Greens, you mentioned he's been a little bit disappointing, but he's been one of those guys that will have 28 touches, 8 tackles, 4 clearances, and score 70, and then he'll have the exact same stats the following week and score 170. I can't really put it together. Like I understand that he has games where he goes by like 28% disposal efficiency, but it's just the wild swings are crazy for the same amount of stats. Similar to Dawson early doors.
Yeah, absolutely. And his disposal efficiency has always been a bit of a knock on him. So I guess if we kind of rank them, I think Chad, Dunkley and Neil are probably all pretty similar. Like
pretty clear. Yeah.
We're getting to that stage of the year where there might only be a few points average between them, and we don't want to sit on the fence, but it probably doesn't really matter which one you pick. Maybe just pick the one you like more or have more confidence in.
Yeah.
I probably agree with you that LDU, like, you're not that far away from getting one of them, so just pay up. The thing with LDU, I will say, looking at the rest of season draw, North Melbourne have the easiest run for midfielders, and by quite a stretch, like they're quite a way ahead of the second team. So LDU should have a really, really nice run to come home. If that's something that you're interested in, you want to play the kind of the matchup, that might be a way. Errol, I'm struggling to have much faith in. I just don't understand why he's kind of dropped off so much. I guess like there's the rise of Heaney, but they play a different position. He just kind of hasn't got it going like he did last year. He's had a few spikes, but I just don't really have confidence that he's 110 guy this year.
Yeah, the thing that I've noticed is he's no longer that 30-plus disposal getter, whereas last year he had, like from memory, he had a couple like 40 disposal games, right? If I'm not mistaken. Where if we go through his disposals this year, he's gone 20, 30, 24, 25, 25, 30, 25, 29, 25, 28, 25. So he's almost lost 10 disposals on what he did yesterday. Then that could be last year. That could be a role change, being that I know he really honestly played as a wing last year, and it's not like Heaney going into the midfield has suddenly changed his role per se. But the thing that is consistent across the season is that the amount of times he's getting the ball is not similar to what he did last year. So you would need a couple rounds of like 30, 30, 35, like to go bang, bang, bang and be like, okay, he's getting the ball again. They're using him out in transition and that kind of stuff. So the reason I brought him up before was just the price difference to Chad in comparison, whether you saw much difference. But he's probably priced fairly, you'd have to say.
Yeah, so on that, I probably wouldn't buy Gordon just because I think those other guys are going to put quite a few points on him through the rest of the year. And then finishing up on Tom Green, I'm biased and have a soft spot, but I still think he is going to be one of the better midfielders this year, like a top 8 guy. But I'm not sure. The data doesn't suggest it at the moment, but maybe he will. We'll see. I have faith, but you'd probably only want to buy him if you had faith as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if we just go into the forwards, there's 3 forwards coming off there by Isaac Heaney, Dane Zorko and Zach Fisher. And I'm not even really going to rank these because my opinion is you want all 3 of these. If you don't have them, like I think you want to get them all because the forward line's so dire. Not dire, but I think these guys are quite clear. We're looking at kind of F6s and F5s maybe that are averaging like in the 90s. I think these three could all be hundreds plus averages, especially Heaney and Zorko. So I actually think you want all three of these and just get the one you don't have. If you don't have two, then prioritise it by break even or something. But
yeah,
I reckon you want all three of these pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's something that this was something you mentioned pre-podcast. The last time you and I sat down to do one of these, we were actually talking about whether Zorko was a good trade-in option.
Yeah,
and you and I both know we recommended everyone sell the farm to get him. Is that exactly the words that you remember us saying?
Yeah, I mean, don't go back and check the podcast to fact check.
Yeah, no, of course.
Exactly
like we are reliable sources of what we said, like as if we wouldn't remember. So no need to go back and check. But
no, that's right. We did say that, but we definitely said. I do remember us saying McGovern is a top 6, and that's panned out real well. So we're looking all right.
Yeah, I'm taking, and you got me to get him in. So look, we're following our own advice. Zorko's obviously got that 66 in his rolling average against the Hawks in round 11. So you can probably play the break evens for a week or two if you needed to, because his break even is going to be like 170. It's 125 this week. On the score of a 106. It'll be 175 the week after. So you can potentially get him for 40 or 50k cheaper, which is important when you're looking for an upgrade, and he's 610,000. So getting him sub 600 is going to be good. I know you didn't say there was much difference, but like if I had to personally pick, I would probably pick Blakey over Whitfield from our conversation just previously.
Yep.
And if someone was only 3k short, I wouldn't be disappointed at them if they were forced to pick up Whitfield this week to win a rivalry league matchup. But Blakey's lack of extreme injury history and untrustability and collarbone snapping and soft tissue injury,
all the freak injuries, Whitfield
and
has.
Sudden tagging and all that kind of stuff, scares me a heck of a lot with Whitfield. But we are throwing everything out. As I've said, every podcast I've been on, Pig, I'm just throwing trades at this team until something good happens with it. And it hasn't happened yet, so we can just keep throwing trades. So, yeah, coming off the bye, I do like the talk that we've had so far in terms of just because we've got that mentality from years previous, particularly when we had less trades, that, you know, like early on in the buys, you sort of want to be building up a war chest and waiting to go bang, bang, bang. This is actually a week where you're going to get this week, next week, and the week after. You're going to get 3 scores during the buys from these players that are genuinely fantasy relevant this year. So I would be definitely trying to. I've somehow brought up keep emojis on your desktop. I don't know how I've done that. Anyway, we'll move on past.
Can you get a Zach Fisher emoji?
They're all really bad cartoon ones. I've got a cat riding Dino Cat. I've got a cat riding a green dinosaur. This is making no sense. So in terms of these upgrade options, we've also got some downgrade options that we could be looking at this week in terms of the guys that we want to be getting out. Is it just as simple as playing the break evens? Because we've got the likes of, say, of Sam Closey or a Will Graham that have relatively high break evens this week, are going to lose cash. The reason I bring this up is because we're going to have so many available players. Is there any necessity to kind of keep these guys that, yes, they're playing and they're scoring relatively okay, but because we've got so many other options, can we afford to use this cash and use them to make these upgrades?
Yeah, look, I think they can go because a lot of us will have nearly 22 players this week. So, for instance, I could keep Darcy Wilson quite comfortably, or even Jack McRae, because they're warmer bodies on field that are probably going to get me an 80. But also I could trade them down and make an upgrade to, say, a Chad Warner, or bank cash next week for someone else coming off their bye. So it's that really fence sitting, but they quite find a hold, but they're also quite find a trade.
Yeah.
And I would probably just order it by break even, really. Like if someone has a break even in the hundreds, like I think Jack McRae is probably going to lose money. Or you could also look at it matchup wise. So you could play the matchup game and see who you think they're playing. So unfortunately, Harley Reid's suspended, but he could have been an example that you could have held because he was playing North and you think he'll give you a spike score. Whereas you look at Sam Darcy, he's playing Brisbane. That's probably going to be really tough, and he's probably...
Well, he's not playing Brisbane. He's going to be playing the couch this week.
He will, there you go. So, but that would be an example for, like, Sam Closey, playing St Kilda.
Yep.
Wingers have scored pretty well against St Kilda, but also he hasn't been amazing lately. So, yeah, I would rank it A by break even, but then also, keep someone with a good matchup if you want.
Yeah, I personally think because we have so many premiums available this week. I don't know about you, but I'm going to have 18 premiums available.
Yep.
Losing Luke Ryan, Houston, and Butters. Some people will have the likes of Hayden Young and maybe Sarong. So, in the worst case scenario, you've probably got 5 premiums that are not playing, and you might want to keep. Say a Closey, who is a guaranteed on-field option for the Suns, whereas Graham's a little bit more iffy in terms of his role and job security. I could be tempted to keep one of those guys, but if you've only got a handful and you're going to have 18 premiums regardless, plus a bunch of other rookies that are going to play, we've got the likes of Fraser and Sullivan. I have absolutely no dramas if you want to be capitalising on that cash gen right now, knowing that they're going to have a bye next week anyway. So the overwhelmingly likely outcome, I've made that really complicated, is that they're at the same price or, within a handful of $1,000 cheaper anyway. So I have no problem in terms of coaches that do want to upgrade for those ones.
I'd even encourage it. Yeah, upgrade it, move them on, upgrade them. And even if we're looking ahead to that round 15 bye, people are going to be cashing in Sullivan, McAuliffe, Fraser, probably plenty of other people. And you've only got 3 trades each week, so you might have to go what's considered slightly early.
Yeah.
To be able to get all 6 players out in 6 trades kind of thing. So, yeah, there's not much point, I guess, holding Closey or someone like that this week if you've already got 22. And the thing is, if you're trading them out, you're probably likely trading in someone that's had a bye, so it's the same amount of playing players.
Yeah. To facilitate some of these moves, and in terms of upgrades, we do have to talk about some of our downgrade options, and this ties into one of our podcast questions. We've had a few people questioning whether it's this time of year where we can start picking up these 102K, I don't want to use the word spuds, but players that we hope get a game at some point in the next 10, 15 rounds of football, but aren't essential to our teams. I'm talking of the likes of going early on Blight before he has a game, or whether you see any genuine downgrade options this week, any players that you thought you could go after one game of sample size last week, as we're starting to fill the sides out and our rookies are less likely to end up as on-field options pick. What are your generalised thoughts around the rookie situation this year?
Yeah, so I guess my philosophy in general is I'm going to try and have, by the end of the buys, my 22 on-field premiums, and then at least one, probably one's enough, one cover in each line. So, and I guess the reason I say that, because if I've already got Zach Reed in my defence, who might not be playing for a long time, I probably don't want to be bringing a second donut into the defence, because even if I have 6 premiums, then if one of them misses, then I have no coverage. So I guess it depends what you've already got in that line a bit. But as if I'm looking in the midfield saying I've got Jai Clark as someone that can just plug a hole for a week, I'm not as worried about just copying a donut in the other spots. So that's one thing I'd look at. The other one is the 102K players. They are pretty valuable in that they obviously generate you the maximum cash. You do a Darcy Wilson down to a 102K player, that's so much money, which is awesome. And there are some good, like we just talked about before, tried to speculate some of the 102 mid-season guys. I think you probably could go early with a little bit of confidence on some of them, but it's probably worth just keeping an eye on Twitter and journos reports and who the most likely ones are going to be. But I guess, like I said, I would want at least one of your bench spots to be playing in each line.
Yeah. An interesting thing for me as well, Pig, is that I know people are looking to move on, say the likes of a McRae, but I actually find it quite interesting because it's very likely that I've got the cash this year to have that M9 F7 swing.
Yep.
And then another rookie option this week being Will Dawson from North, which would make a really handy defensive forward Zach Fisher swing as well. Like there's every chance that we can cover all of our lines. I mean, presume you've got like say Luke Jackson in the forward line. There is the outcome that we could cover all of our lines quite comfortably if you
with two players or something instead of 4 on the bench.
Yeah, so like if instead of getting, like my final upgrade is going to be a forward line player, I've already got Fisher, Heaney, Zorko, and Flanders. So I'm really shopping in the 450 to 500k range. I've done the numbers, and just cashing in Moyle, Fraser, and Sullivan. Considering I'll take a 124k rookie, I'm going to have a 600 grand to spend in my forward line as my last upgrade. Like I'm going to have a bit of cash left over. I could realistically find a bit of cash from the remaining rookies I've got to have a genuine 23 premium side, which I know you and I have talked about that you don't like doing. You prefer to have all that money making inroads on your field. But I see a genuine use case scenario where we've got, our F5 and F6 are like an 85 to 95 averaging forward, where we could be looping week on week and trying to get the best F6 score possible.
Yeah, I think it definitely has more appeal to me this year, especially with guys, I guess, like McKercher, who have DPP, who are about 300k, and could potentially come in and play a role where they could be going 100 kind of thing. So, yeah, I think it is an option. Like last year, I know people kind of had like the Darcy Camerons and the Himmelbergs and the Ben Keys in that kind of role for around the same price, and it didn't really work, I think, because they were kind of looping 270s with each other.
Whereas I don't think the floor was the same last year, is what I'm getting at. I feel like the floor in the forward line is leaving the door open to be able to do this and sort of get away with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair, because last year, if you had the 6 premium forwards, they were putting so many points on Himmelberg or Keys, no matter who you looped last year. Whereas this year, yeah, you're right. Your D6 could be any number of them, and they could all be just doing 80s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a fair option. And you kind of said, because we've got so much DBP, you could nearly cover your whole bench just with 2 players on the bench and then the rest are donuts, potentially, if you planned it well. Yeah. But to answer your original question about, is there anyone else kind of on the bubble that I like? I don't really. I mean, Will Dawson is the most traded player in player this week, and it looks like everyone's getting him, but I do have some concerns about his job security and even his scoring potential. Like, he had a couple of good scores, but there's also the other Dawson to come back in. There's not enough room for 2 Dawsons in one team.
Yeah.
We've talked to quite a few North players in Slack, and they just don't think he's going to last very long. So that does worry me. If he is named this week, I guess you could go for it and just see what happens. But I don't have much confidence in his job security. Leaker Lear, I think, does have a bit more job security. When he was on the bubble, I wasn't keen on him because he was kind of warming Taylor's spot, I thought. But then Taylor's come back. I'm pretty sure Aaliyah came out, and now Aaliyah's back in. So I'm not sure whose spot he is in. I know Lockie Ash is out, so maybe it's that. But after his heroics last game, you think he's earned himself quite a few more games. So Aaliyah could be an option, but he's in an elevated price.
Mm. And I suppose no different to the likes of McAuliffe, Harvey Harrison, Sullivan, these guys that we were considering last week as our downgrade options because we had literally nothing else to pick from.
Yeah, it's quite similar to that. I guess the difference is that those guys, like, we're planning to trade them out at their buy, whereas Aaliyah, I guess you could let him make a few cash for a few more weeks and then trade him out kind of as to help your last upgrade.
Mm.
So, yeah, I don't mind him. Actually, he's probably my favourite now after talking that through. Harry Edwards for West Coast. He's had a couple of good games. Like, he's actually looks pretty good in person. I watched the game and he looks like a solid defender, but he is a big key defender that I'm not sure about the scoring potential. I think he's got a bit of job security, might be one, although he does have a bye quite soon. McMullen for GWS, I actually think he's a little bit of an option while Cogs is injured because he started to sub that last game. Canelio got subbed out at halftime. He came on and actually put a really good score on in half a game. So if he's not sub and he's kind of playing that Canelio role, and also Josh Kelly's still out as far as I'm aware, McMullen could be an option for a couple of weeks to make a little bit of cash. Lockie McNeil for Bulldogs, he's another one that's been sub a bit, but Bulldogs forward line, like small forwards, is just getting decimated at the moment. So a few of the Bulldogs guys in Slack thought he actually might get a prolonged run, so he could be someone. Elevated price again slightly. And then Logan Morris for Brisbane, I'm not really that interested. To be honest, I don't know much about him. I think Brisbane rookies seem to be a bit of a blind spot for me. They just pop up these names and I don't know who they are. So were there any of those that tickled your fancy, or would you rather kind of take a punt on a Blight or a Geordie Payne or a Sard 102K?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This is something I field every week. It's like Monday afternoon, I'll get a DM with a bunch of screenshots saying, should I do A, B, and C? And it's like, dude, we really need to see teams. I can't tell you the one where you're getting Dawson versus the one you're getting Aaliyah is any better because neither of them could be playing, or they both could be playing. You know what I mean? Like, and that North Melbourne defense, they've had Dawson, the other Dawson, Pink, Hardiman, Archer, dozens of their players going through, and they've played
Biggie.
Yeah, the Biggie was in there. So you get 3 or 4 games out of a bunch of these guys, and then they just get sent back to the VFL indefinitely. So it's certainly one to keep an eye on for teams and JB's lockout stream. If you haven't tuned in that before, chuck him a follow. Because, like as much as there may be downgrade options the way that we filter by, projected price changes, we really need to see teams before we can make those decisions. And a lot of these guys, let's say like a Dawson, a Will Dawson, for example, his job security may not be even as good as the guys that are on 102K. Let's say a Blight that comes in for Richmond when their injuries have been so decimated and he's a mature body. Like, he could have better job security straight out of the gate than Dawson does entering his third game. So,
I'd probably say he does, even though he's never played an AFL game. Might be a big call, but I'd say he does. So I'd probably say the two GWS guys, Aaliyah and McMullen, are probably my favourites if you want someone on the bubble ready to make a bit more cash.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing is, like, I'll only have 9 trades after this week. So if I'm getting Aaliyah in, I'm not actually sure I've got enough trades to get him out. Get that cash. So that's why I'm really keen on these 102 guys, because I'm probably never going to get them out. So I might as well get the cheapest one. Yeah.
I understand that. Pig, I do want to touch on 2 premiums that are sort of on everyone's lips after the last couple of weeks. One of them is my boy and one of them is your boy. I'm going to start with your boy. You went early on the guy and were paid off handsomely. That's Dylan Moore. You've been a very happy owner, very chuffed pig in Slack every time he kicks a snag. You get to pop in and say, I picked him up 2 weeks ago, guys. So you should check out my captaincy videos on YouTube. I'm really good at this Supercoach game. Talk to me about your boy and whether he is still an option with his buy coming up.
Yeah, well, you're right. I'm a happy Dylan Moore owner. I've had him for his 140 and his 169. But in between those two, he did have a 76, a 66, and a 73. So there was a little bit of grimness in there. And I think some people were getting angry and wanting to trade him out, which is crazy. But this is just what the forward line is. Like, we're going to get a lot of guys with a lot of fluctuation. You look at Moore, Rankin, Fisher could. Like, Myers just put out a 30 after going hundreds. Curnow, Mackay. I think whoever you get in these kind of let's say F5, F6 spots are going to give you these roller coasters, and Moore's one of them. So, like, I'm a really happy owner because he's holding down that spot instead of a rookie. But if you had even Brian Myers or if you had Charlie Curnow or someone instead of him, I don't think he's necessarily a big upgrade over them. I think they're all going to be pretty similar, to be honest. So with Dylan Moore, I wouldn't get him before his buy. Like, he's just I don't think I'd really get anyone 1 week before their bye. You've got one more game on him. Then he has a bye. Yes, his break even's 47, but he plays GWS. He could get another 70 and only go up a couple of K. And then you just get him for like 510 or something after his bye as your F6 or something. So I wouldn't buy him yet. I would just wait till after his bye. But, you know, that 169 was glorious, and he can do that. And he, like, I'm just looking at his scores. He's already got 5 over 100. He's got 3 scores over 136. So he's got that ceiling.
Yeah.
Which is really, really nice. In the forward line, it just means he's also got the floor. But great player. I picked him because I just love watching him. I think he's a really nice mover. So I'm happy, but wait till after his bye, I'd say.
Really nice mover and shaker. Yeah, look, the guys that are vying for those final forward spots, the Mackays, the Kernos, like Cordwell, Fisher. Fisher probably doesn't necessarily fit into that.
Yeah, I'd put him a bit above all them.
Bit above. And Jackson, when Darcy's playing, also fits into this category of a kind of 90 average. They've all sort of got that high ceiling game, but they're also going to chuck out a lot of 50s and 70s. Like, if you're just looking at Kerno, who's averaging 90 for the year, very similar to Dylan Moore, just over the last couple of months, 81, 90, 71, 108, 59, 103, 79. Like, it's just that very, like, middling 80s sort of average, and then he gets a 110 to kind of poke it back up.
Yeah.
And sort of similar with Mackay as well. Like, in the last 6 weeks, he hasn't tonned up, but he's got 3 90s, you know. So the thing that stands out with Moore that is probably bumping his average up, because he's gone 76, 66, 73, which is not what Curnow and Mackay have done. They've, in a 3-week span, I don't think they've not broken 80 before. Moore then will just pop in with a 170, and that's what pops up his average. So he's going to be a little bit more of a roller coaster than, say, a Harry Mackay, who's averaging 94 for the year, very similar, but he hasn't got that similar the ceiling that he's had since kind of round 3. Since round 4, it's sort of just been that flat 90s average.
The stats people out there will talk about standard deviation.
That's right.
Standard deviation. Dylan Moore's standard deviation is through the roof, whereas Mackay's is very, very tight. So they're variants. So I guess the way I see the forward line is that Heaney, Zorko, Flanders, and Fisher I'm going to put as the top 4, and they clear. I think Rankin is the next one if he's healthy and plays mids, and I'm kind of saving my F6 for him when he comes back.
Yeah.
But then literally that next spot, that could be any number. We talked about Mushy Peas before. There's probably a Mushy Pea forward line as well. There's probably like 8 players that you could have at that F6 that will probably end up with like a low 90s average. Depends if you want the high standard deviation Dylan Moore, or if you want the low one in safety of Harry Mackay. Or I don't think your F6 is really going to matter if you've got one of those guys.
I will give you... I've just found the consistency rating.
Oh.
In SuperCoach stats.
Yes.
The best consistency rated premium forward, and I've gone 430k and above. I'll just make it a flat 400. Is Sam Flanders. He's got a consistency score of 114 to 132 SuperCoach.
Yep, that checks out.
Second place is Heaney with a consistency rating of 10.1 of 85 to 105 in recent scores. I don't know where that comes from. Harry Mackay at 13.4. Jack McRae at 13.7.
Oh.
You can get a consistent 74 out of him if you're interested. Charlie Curnow with 16.7. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom, we've got Dane Zorko with 44.7. Blake Hardwick, 48.8. And Dylan Moore, 41.7. Literally the worst consistency ratings of premium forwards that we can pick from.
That's so funny. That's a good find. So who would have thought that the 2 Carlton key forwards are actually consistent?
Yeah.
I guess in a good team.
Just middle of the pack. Of the pack.
All right. So, yes, Dylan Moore after his bye.
Yeah, sure. Does his a break even that he's going to go up this week change your thoughts at all? Like, is 30k, 50k, it's not going to change your mind at all?
No. Especially
I don't
even
think so
if,
either.
even
He's
if he does,
he's cheap enough.
yeah, he'll still be cheap enough. But also, you might see after his buy, like even if he's 530, you still might be able to get a Mackay at 450 or something, and you might just choose that instead.
Yeah, sure. The other premium that I do want to talk about is my boy Jordan the Riddler. I messed that up, but Pig, he has been sensational since he's come back. He has impacted Nick Martin. I've seen people trading in Nick Martin with like a break even of I want to say it's like 137. And I'm like, bro, have you not seen the Bombers' last two games? A break even of 129, and people are trading into it. I'm like, guys, like he was great early doors, but his last four games of 83, 100, and then with Ridley back, 97 and 80. Ridley's just a guy that they want to use more. Like Martin's still going to get 30 touches a game, and you've got to remember that he's going to turn over 15 of those. So is he still going to ton up with those 15 effective disposals for the rest of the game?
Well, Ridley's just a much better kick, so they just want it in his hands. Plus, he's actually doing the intercepting, so therefore the ball's in his hands. Yeah, Ridley's just a really, really good player. He has impacted Martin a fair bit. Yeah, you're right. One of the interesting thing, I was watching Martin's scores last week. I think he was on 36 or 37 at quarter time.
Yeah.
Then he had about one disposal in the second quarter and just went missing. Then he had a good third quarter, and then he did nothing in the fourth. So it's a real roller coaster. I'm still hoping Martin's around the 100 mark. Like this 80 last week was poor. He should have kicked a clutch goal that probably would have got it over 90. He was around the mark. He just went quiet for a quarter.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that Martin can still stick around 100, but there's no way I'm trading him in. If I had luxury trades, I would look to trade him out, but I've got 9 trades left. I think I'm stuck with him.
Yeah, look, it's not panic stations if you have him. I don't think it's going to be, we're going to be sitting here in a month's time and be like, my season's ruined because I held on to Nick Martin. I don't think that's the case at all. We've still seen since Ridley has come back, he's had 29 touches and 24 touches. So he's still getting his hands on the ball and he's still the link man. I noticed that he's had 4 shots on goal in the first 10 rounds of the year, and he's had 3 shots on goal in the last 2 weeks since Ridley's come back. So it does make me wonder whether he's playing slightly higher up the ground. So rather than getting those cheapies out of the deep back 50, which is what we saw very early, whether he's just probably spending time, 30 metres higher up the ground in terms of where he's spending the majority of his time. Because Ridley coming back is so important for Essendon as well. And obviously he was taking quite a large portion of kickouts as well. Like if we think the first 8 weeks, he had a low of 1 and a high of 6 in 3 games. He had 6 kick-ins. In the last month, he's had 0, 0, 2 last week with Ridley back and 0 again this week. So
yeah, that has certainly dropped off. And they do want Ridley. Well, Bombers share it around anyway with the kickouts. Like Ridley.
Yeah, they do.
With Ridley, Redmond, McGrath, Heppel, Martin. It's someone different every time nearly. So that was kind of never going to be like something that Martin was going to have a market share of. But with Ridley back, it's just another one. So, yeah, I fully agree that he's impacted Martin. But in terms of actually trading in Ridley as a primo, what do you think about that?
I like it. I do like Ridley. He obviously took us to the promised land in 2021 when we expected where we called the breakout. I think he's probably as cheap as you'll get him now. I think he's another guy that falls into the same category as Dylan Moore, is that you're very unlikely to be able to get both of them off the bye, but they're both going to be great picks to finish off the remainder of the year. Depends what your cash situation is like, Pig. But the extra 30k that Ridley has in terms of his current price, so he's 530, he's projected to go up 40k this week. So you're going to be trying to get a 570k Ridley and a 540k Dylan Moore the week after. I almost think you have to probably, like if you can fit it into your buys, I wouldn't be talking someone out of picking one up this week. And I'd probably be getting Ridley ahead of of Moore, just because I think Ridley's floor is going to be a little bit better with the role that he has. Fitting it into your buys is going to be the difficult thing. And I'd love to get Ridley if I had the cash, but I just simply don't.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think both Ridley and Moore are great players and will be great in your team, but I don't think either of them are must-have. Like, talked about Dylan Moore, there's a lot of guys that you could easily replace him with, like the Kernos or the Mackay's or the Myers or whoever it is. Ridley, I think, is the same. Like, you could have a Jordan Clark or a Max Holmes or a Ed Richards or someone in that last defender spot that I think is going to do pretty much the same as Ridley. So I don't think he's really someone that you need to like rush and grab. But he is really, really unique, and we know he's got a huge ceiling and a pretty safe floor. I think he is a really good pick. I don't want to trade someone in the week before their bye, so I would wait.
Yeah.
But yeah, 570 Jordan Ridley, that's still okay to pay for a premium defender. I'm not against that, paying that after his bye, but it's kind of, we're getting to the stage where it's personal preference. Like, we're talking about Chad Warner versus Lachie Neale, Jordan Ridley versus Jordan Clark, Dylan Moore versus Harry Mackay. They're probably all going to average similar to the person that I've paired them to there, and it's really personal preference in a way.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting question. That is just in terms of personal preference. Who do you think is more important to your finished team? A Dylan Moore F4 player, who's like that's where he's currently averaging at the moment as an F4, or a Jordan Ridley who probably falls into the D5, 6, 7, 8 kind of area?
Probably the forward.
It's probably Dylan Moore, right?
Yeah.
It's weird. He's probably going to average 15 points less than Jordan Ridley. Okay.
Yeah.
Over the course of the year, 95 average to 110 average, let's just say. But it almost feels like Dylan Moore is more important based on how pathetic the forward line is.
Yep. I think that's fair. There's so many defenders that could average around the same as Ridley. And Moore's probably one of the best high upside forwards. So, yeah. In a shoddy line.
Yep, that's it. I've got another podcast question here for you, Pig. Someone is asking the pros and cons of having a war chest as big as $500,000. I can only imagine that's because they're planning on doing upgrades next week.
This is really interesting because I know this person is saying they've got that war chest because they don't have Ryan, they don't have Sarong.
Yep.
And they want to get them kind of in the next 2 weeks. Having that much money in the bank just, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me, especially when there's some really nice players coming off the bye. So you're kind of losing points in it, like maybe taking a 1 week points hit. But I think Luke Ryan is getting to kind of must-have territory. The way, like, his scoring is so consistent, and Jaden Poposky's talked a bit about it on a coach's panel with your mate MJ a few weeks ago, where he was just talking about how consistent Luke Ryan is and how sustainable his scoring is. Like, it's not going to drop off. He could genuinely do a 130 year, just the way he scores. So I think Luke Ryan, absolutely, you need to go get him. And if that means banking $500K and you're getting Ryan and Sarong, I guess in 2 weeks, I probably would do that because I wouldn't want to finish my team without Luke Ryan and without Caleb Sarong, I think.
Yeah, at least not both of them.
Yeah, definitely Ryan. And I think Sarong's going to be the highest averaging midfielder this year. So, yeah, I would like them both. So maybe if that's the only way you get them, I probably would do it. But it does feel like you're probably going to take a rankings hit this week for it.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about many, many times on this podcast, and it's the opportunity cost you have. It's a literal cost to your team by not using that money to purchase on-field points. The trade-off being that instead of getting a 100 averaging midfielder, you wait a week, lose out on say 50 points from a rookie coming on field instead, and you're buying someone that's averaging 20 points higher, in the case of Saron, for example, that over the course of the rest of the year, you're going to outpace them.
Yeah.
But you are genuinely costing points this week in the hope that you're going to be purchasing more later. That's the point. So in theory, having money in the bank is costing you, but if you're purchasing a better commodity on the way home, that's all part of the situation. So the question is it a bad idea? It's all to do with the strategy that you have and what you're going to do with that cash. If you're not planning on, you're just going to buy a bunch of guys next week instead of this week, that's not strategic enough that opportunity cost has been weighed up and you go, I'm doing this for this reason. So as long as you know that I'm picking up the absolutely essentials that you have missed, like a Ryan and Sarong, there's no problem having that amount of cash in your war chest, because for Ryan, who's 667k, and Sarong, that's 629k, you're going to need a big war chest in order to get them. It's just as simple as that. So you've got to be emotionally okay knowing that you are costing something this week, but you're going to be purchasing something better in the future. Or at least that's the bet that you're making. So I wouldn't be remotely stressed about that if these are the players you're going to get. If you've already got Ryan and Sarong and you're saving that amount of money to get Houston, I mean, like, there's 15 other blokes that's probably going to average what Houston's going to do this year, like that 105 average. So, well, not 15, but you can probably just pick up one this week that you haven't got, like a Blakey or a Whitfield or whoever that's in the same ballpark. But for the guys that are so top tier that you just absolutely need to find a way to get, and you can do it, there's no problem with it.
Yeah, you've absolutely nailed my thinking there. I wouldn't do it for a Sarong or a Luke Jackson or whoever else is kind of coming off the bye next week. Yeah. But if it's Ryan or Sarong that you don't have, absolutely do it.
Sure. I've got another question. This is one that's been plaguing my team, particularly Pig, but I'd love your thoughts as well. What should we do with these underperforming cancers of our side, which are like the Clarys, the McRae's, the Stewarts, these significantly underperforming quote-unquote premiums that we purchased in the hope would have upside, but to this point have not shown they have any upside?
Generally, I'd say hold to your buy and then try and trade them. But this week, with us having 22, you could probably trade them this week if you wanted to. But it is really about looking at how many trades you've got left. So, like I said, I'll have 9 left after this week. I'm probably going to need most of those to finish my team. How many sideways can I afford, or before I run out of trades? So I guess that's the real thing. Look at maybe plan ahead and see how many trades you think you're going to need to get to your full 22 primos, and then see how many you've got left. Generally, we want to try and have like 4 or 5 left for the run home. Maybe that's actually too much. People often have 2 or 3 and can still get through if you've got a bit of bench cover. So, yeah, if you're probably looking at your team and you're going to have like 6 trades left, it could be worth doing something like that. I'm so off Tom Stewart. I can't believe I bought him. So he's someone that I'm looking to go, because I genuinely think he's like probably going to be giving up 15, 20 points to even a D6. So he could go, I think. Clary, I think. I don't think Clary's going to be near the top mids. I think he can go. Jack McRae can go. Although McRae is probably closer to the D6 than, say, Clary is to the M10.
Yeah,
so McRae's not a horrible hold. He's just really frustrating.
Yeah, McRae's only really losing like, say, 10 points to who you're probably going to have at F6, because the forward line drops off precipitously. Oh, what's happening? Am I having a stroke? The points just drop off so quickly that the 6th highest averaging player is around that 90 mark this year in the forward line, Pig. So, you're kind of scraping by, like losing maybe 10 points a week with McRae if we don't see any uptick in his performance. And he's now taking contested marks in the forward line, which he's never done in his entire career, Pig. So maybe he has turned a corner. But I think like you've mentioned with the likes of, say, Clary and Stewart, if this form continues, they are so far behind players that we have in those respective lines. It'd be like not having Gorn in favour of 100 averaging ruck. Like, you're losing 30 points a week on average. Like, it's just it would decimate you. So you need to balance that with how can I finish my team. This has always been my buy strategy, is to kind of build around these guys, get to the end of the buys with as most optimal trading strategy as possible. Because remember, these guys are going to be providing scores on field as well. Like, you don't want to be destroying your cadence or ending a particular week with one less player than you would have had you just left them in your side and got a player off there by a standard upgrade. So keeping all that in mind, I tend to build around them. So McRae, Oliver are the two like kind of ones in my team that are a thorn in my side. I'm going to build around them, and then I am trying to force one of these guys to the bench if possible, with that 23rd premium, which is what I'm hoping to do.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's fair as well. Like, trying to loop them, because especially, I guess, Stewart and Oliver do have high ceilings when they get it going. They just haven't really got it going.
Yeah.
So if they were on your bench and you could loop them, it's not the end of the world. I've discussed it before. I just like to actually have that cash on field, so I just try and trade them to the big dog.
The only thing that sort of I'm considering is that we're 12 of 24 rounds.
Yeah, we're only halfway.
And I've got one upgrade still to make with Clary and McGray in my team, like on field. So let's say that's 3 trades. I'm down to 7. Let's say I get down to 5 or 4 just to get one of these guys off field or to be able to upgrade one of them. I've got like 10 rounds with theoretically, best case scenario, 3 or 4 trades to get through. It's
going to be a nervous ride.
It is going to be one of those things where I've thrown so much energy and effort to try and get to this point that I'm just holding on for dear life. I'm on a roller coaster and my seatbelt has slowly come unbuckled, and I've realised I'm like, oh God, I have to hold on to anything I can before I fly out. So I am sort of kind of, I don't know if we've got the rookie cover like we've had in years past where, or you've got, say, someone like a McKercher. McKercher would be perfect for someone that you might want to hold all year as that cover forward and midfield. So if there was a couple of those, like say maybe you found a way, you found the cash to do a closey as like a held person all year at D7 and M9 as like that 70 average, like I would absolutely just throw all of my cash on field. But I don't think I'm going to have that sort of cover. I'm going to have like Biggie and Rogers and Jai Clark and whatever 102K comes in this week, and that's going to be my bench cover.
No,
and
I'm
so
the same.
And so if I go down to 5 trades and then I don't have cover, every time I get an injury or a 1 week suspension, or like I've combined Whitfield with McGovern, with Zorko, with Fisher, with Green. Like at some point, the wheels are going to fall off, and being cognizant of that rather than just praying for the best outcome and just going, I'm just going to throw all the cash on the field, don't worry about the bench. That's something that I'm trying to stay cognizant of and plan ahead a little bit for. It's why I'm probably going to get Luke Jackson at F6 over some other types while Sean Darcy's in the team, because I know at some point there's like a 90% chance I'm going to need him.
Yeah. That ruck cover. I think Piston and I have discussed this a bit, and he's kind of that same opinion where I guess there's 2 ways you go. You either put all your money on field and have what you think's the best 22, but to do that you need trades up your sleeve. You need to have more than those 3 or 4. So that's one way you play. Or you play by maybe having less trades but having much better bench cover and some DPP swings. So, and you got to kind of be thinking about it now as you're making your upgrades. Like, Blight might be a really good option to trade in for Richmond, But then if you've got him and Zach Reed as your D7 and 8, you can't swing your McKerches and Martins kind of back into defence to cover because they're just the two guys on your bench are just plain defenders.
Yeah.
So I guess when you're bringing people in now, just be thinking about your DPP as well.
Yeah, sure. Pig, the last thing that we'll touch on before we get out of here, you've done some ruck fixture analysis that you've been begging to share on the podcast this week.
Yep.
You've got it all highlighted in spreadsheets and fancy colours. I'd love you to drop some knowledge on the lovely listeners about your ruck fixture, because there's a lot of people that are going to be looking for an R2 either this week or next week.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do this because I've had so many questions about this. I think it's even started last week when Meek and Sweet were out. People were saying, "Oh, what do we do? Who do we upgrade to? Who are our two rucks going to be?" Our advice, Pistol and I, was kind of just hold fast this week. Try and not make your ruck choice, and let's assess now, especially with Grundy coming off the bye. Is he going to kind of match English, for example? And then a lot of those people, Moyle popped up, so I might have jumped on him to cover for that week. So that's an option. But I have done a bit of a deep dive, so it's a bit of a spiel. I've written myself a script, so you might just have to buckle in and have a listen, Cheezo, and then I'll get your comments at the end to see what you think.
Sure, shoot.
I've just taken a drink of water to get ready to reel this off.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I've done a bit of a deep dive on the big 5 Supercoach ruckmen. So this is Grundy, English, Marshall, Gawn and Tristan Cherry. Looked at their fixture difficulty between now and the end of the season. As you mentioned before, there's still 12 weeks left. So using my own scale, which I've been using, which looks at opposition ruckman hit out percentage. So it's the ruckman they come up against, how good they are at winning the hit out. I found that to be a really good indicator of scoring. And then I've also kind of looked at DFS Australia and looked at their matchup data. And what would you know? They gave an identical ranking of difficulty. So I guess we've got 2 different scales here saying exactly the same thing in terms of difficulty. And what they're saying is that Grundy has the easiest draw to come from now to the end of the season. Then Tim English and Max Gawn have the equal second best run, followed by Tristan Cherry, and then Marshall has the hardest run for the rest of the year. But then also, that's the rest of the year. But if we just look at the Supercoach finals, so the last 4 rounds, it's a different story. Marshall actually has the easiest last 4 weeks and by a big margin. So I guess I'll go into that a bit more. I would say Max Gawn is obviously the must-have. Like, he's averaging 130 points per game. I'm assuming you have him. And if you don't have Max Gawn, I just say just go and get him as soon as you can or after his bye. So I'm more looking at that R2, who you should have in that spot. I'm going to rule Cherry out. He's had the easiest ruck run of all the rucks so far, and he's still been off the pace of the top guys. And now he has the second hardest run home, and he has a very hard Supercoach finals run. So I would say don't look at Cherry as your R2. If you still own him and have held him, I guess you could hold him, but I'd be looking to upgrade. Then Rowan Marshall, he's always an option, but with the hardest ruck run, both according to my system and DFS Australia, I wouldn't go there if you're looking for overall ranking. Thing with Marshall, he does play 8 of his last 9 games at Marvel Stadium after his bye, where he does score pretty well there, but they are against opponents that have been quite challenging. So I'm not really looking at Marshall if you're playing for ranking, but if you are playing for league glory, Marshall is the easiest. He has the easiest matchup over the final month of the season and by a long way. So if you're not bothered by ranking and you just want the best players in round 21 to 24, I think Marshall is actually a really good option. He could come home strong. But if you're playing for overall ranking, which I think most people listening are, most people kind of want the next 12 weeks who's going to score the most. I think Brodie Grundy is a great option to trade in. And that's kind of hard for me to say because I started him and then I was really happy to get rid of him really quickly to English. But Grundy's a great option now. He's had his bye. He's also averaged 110 points a game this year, despite he's had the hardest run of all the ruckmen so far. So the first 12 rounds of the season, Grundy's run has been the hardest by quite a way. So now that he has the easiest run in the last 12, I'd expect his average to push up probably closer to 115 maybe for the second half of the year. And one thing with Grundy is he's averaging 131 points at the SCG this season, but he's averaging 92 at other grounds. That's a huge discrepancy. And so he does play 6 of his final 12 games at the SCG. So you're probably expecting half of his games will be really big scores. Half might be a bit average, but it should average out to a pretty nice. This week in particular, he has Geelong at the SCG, which I think should be an incredible instant reward or a bit of a sugar hit for those trading him in. But Grundy does have the hardest final 4 rounds, so for Supercoach finals. So I wouldn't be getting Grundy if you're playing for league, but I would be quite interested if you're playing for overall ranking. And then the last option that I guess we're comparing Grundy to, it boils down to Grundy versus Tim English in my mind for that spot. So I just said that Grundy has the easiest fixture on the run home. Well, Tim has the second easiest fixture for the remainder of the year. His only detriment is that he has a bye in that. So I guess the question we need to ask is, can 11 games of English outscore 12 games of Grundy? And I'm of the opinion that the 130 averaging days of English are done. We did some analysis in Slack last week, and shout out to Blake as well for assisting with this. We deep dived into it in Slack. Well, we found that in 2023, Tim English was attending 103 ruck contests per game. This year, he's only attending 94 per game. So that's 9 ruck contests less per game. And that isn't a Sam Darcy effect. That isn't a change in the team at all, because English is still attending the same percentage of ruck contests. What's happened is that in 2023, the Bulldogs were the highest stoppage team in the league, and it was kind of unsustainable how many stoppages they were having. This year, they've regressed to the norm, which is leading to about 10% less stoppages per game, which, if there's less stoppages per game, it means less opportunities for a ruckman to score points. That isn't a big worry, but it's probably more of an indication that last year was actually the outlier year for Tim English, I think. His 130 year is probably the outlier, and this year is probably more a truer reflection of his Supercoach game. I think he's probably a 115 to 120-ish guy. He's averaging 112 at the moment, but he did have some down games in there and something I'd expect him to bounce back. And with his easy run home, I'd probably expect him to average, let's say it's 120 from now to the end of the season, given his easier run. So I guess if we do the maths, you look at 12 Grundy games, let's be conservative even. I think he's 115, but let's be conservative and say it's 113 versus 11 English games going at 120. Grundy scores 36 points more. And if it is more like 115, Grundy scores even more than that. So that is even assuming English can get up to 120, which is no guarantee. Grundy only needs to average 110 to equal him, just due to the extra game that Grundy plays. And Grundy's already done 110, averaging 110 this year with a very hard run. So I actually think Grundy should beat 110 with an easy fixture. So my recommendation for your R2 slot is if you should choose one of Grundy or English if you're playing for overall rank. I think it will be quite similar in terms of total points between the two of them, so you could pick which one you like more. If you made me choose, I would actually say Grundy scores more total points than English from now until round 24. And I actually think Grundy might even be a better VC option at times, because Grundy's having these huge 150 spikes at the SCG and then he's going average elsewhere, so he could be a VC option, whereas English is just kind of doing between 110 and 130 every week and hasn't really given you a VC spike. So I'd choose between one of them if you're going for ranking. If you're playing for league wins, I think you actually could really look at Rowan Marshall just for those last 4 rounds. So there's my spiel. What do you think about that, Cheezo? Is your ruck finished, or what's that made you think if it hasn't?
So I've still got Gawn and English from when I upgraded Grundy after like the first month or so.
Yep.
Which has been a massive fail in terms of what Tim English, I thought,
I did the same thing.
Was going to put out. I mean, I picked him up, I think, at the end of round 4. Yeah, I got him at the round 4. 119, 138, 124, 117, averaging 125. And then I picked him up and he went 58 and then doo-dooed ever since. I still think that 112 is unders for English. Like, I do genuinely believe he's got that 120-ish sort of average for the remainder of the year. But it's hard to go past Grundy playing that extra game. Like, it seems like it's yeah, this is everything that we thought that Grundy was going to do. Like, at the start of the year, we thought he was going to be that 110, maybe 115 was probably our projection. And so he is definitely underachieving in terms of what we thought he was going to do, but he's got a low of 71, which happened in round 1. And then 99, 93, 83, 86. Like, he's really only had 2 poor games, quote unquote, in the 80s since round 1. Like, he's actually been quite good. And we got rid of him as a 103 averaging ruckman for a 125 averaging ruckman. And
now they're about the same since then.
Now they're about the same. And Grundy would have quite clearly outscored English in that 2-month time frame. So having an extra game on top of English, like, it's going to be really difficult to bridge that gap and make him a higher point scorer between now and the end of the season. And coming off the bye, he also get Grundy for the entirety of the byes as well. So as we all know, that's probably the one time of the year you have the best chance to make some moves if you've planned for your bye structure as well. So as much as I probably didn't realise it prior to the podcast, and we're interested with some of the DMs I've got about Grundy as the R2, I think you've convinced me. I think
it's time to go back to set and forget. It might be the last time it happens, the Grandy combo. But if I didn't have English, I would probably be going to Grundy because, like I said, you just said then you think English can get back to 120, from now to the end of the year. I agree. That's what I think he'll do as well. But Grundy only needs to go 110 to equal that.
Exactly.
And he's doing 110 with the hard fixture, so I'm expecting maybe even 115 Grundy with the easier fixture. So
yeah,
I'd nudge people towards Grundy for league, and you could probably consider English Grundy for overall, and Marshall potentially for leagues. So there you go.
Great.
I've had a lot of people asking that, so that's my Gawn and Grundy, I think, is R1 and R2.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you so much for doing that. Like, it certainly has opened my eyes a little bit there. Like, I'm very surprised in the performance that Grundy's had this year.
People were calling me the ruck whisperer at the start of the year, so I feel like I've got to maintain the reputation.
You whisper a lot of things to me in the middle of the night, so let's make it about SuperCoach as well. Mate, thanks so much for sitting down and doing this long-form podcast with me. It's been fantastic. Where can everyone find you during the week if they do want to get you on the socials?
I am on Twitter at pig_DRSC.
You can find the rest of us at pistol_DRSC, JB_DRSC, Cheezo with a Z_DRSC, and our main page at Dr_SC. Pig, it's been fantastic. Thank you everyone for listening. It's been great to be back on with another episode. We'll catch you all in the next episode.